I just did.
Oh, okay. Hey, everybody, and welcome. This is the Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group's monthly Meet a Member, where we take some time to get to know one of our members. We're changing it up a little bit this time. Mark and I had so much fun last month that Michael invited us to host this time. So Michael is still here. He is backstage so that we don't burn everything down, but we're going to give it a try. Our guest tonight is the president of the Blackwater Turtle Refuge, Rusty Reed. Rusty has been working with alligator snapping turtles for 40 years through rescue and public education. Welcome, Rusty, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight.
Well, I'm pretty excited to do this, so thanks for asking me to. And whenever I get to talk about turtles, I'm pretty happy to do that. So this is a neat group to be part of. Pretty honored.
Oh, looks like we just lost Mark.
He'll come back.
So, just to kick us off, do you mind sharing why alligator snapping turtles? It's probably one of the most difficult species to keep size-wise, and I'm assuming feeding is difficult too. What got you started?
Well, I get asked that a lot because I've been in the public eye with alligator snapping turtles for so long. And when you say 40 years, I never would have dreamed, well over half my life at this point. So why alligator snapping turtles is definitely why turtles you hear out of most people. But when I'm speaking with the TTPG, I don't get asked that, right? Why turtles? None of us can answer that, maybe. I did hear a good explanation on one man's definition on why turtles, and I'll talk about that later. I might hit on that. But why alligator snapping turtles? They were just snapping. I grew up in Indiana. I grew up in northern Indiana, and we had common snapping turtles. And my grandparents owned or lived on a 200-acre wetlands with a lake in the middle of it. My great uncle actually owned the land. So it was a really neat piece of property with 200 acres of wetlands. And so my first swim, for instance, when I was just a few months old, was in a creek that drains out of a swamp. And my mom introduced me to the creek, the swamp, and it just got in my blood. And growing up, we would go visit my grandparents every couple of weeks. It was about a 50-mile drive. And I think every 2 weeks we would go there, and the kids would us, the cousins, and would all just run wild out in this wetlands with Massasauga rattlers and turtles. And I remember my cousin, he grew up under my grandparents, and he had this big collection of Eastern box turtles and Blandings turtles and stuff. We were just kids, we didn't even know they were just turtles. We're talking 5-year-olds, and there were so many turtles on this property. So it just kind of got into me, I grew up with a turtle as far back as I can remember in my hand. At one point every summer, I would be handling a turtle. Now, why alligator snapping turtles? I was fascinated with the vicious common snapping turtle, and my neighbor to us that was also a big part of my upbringing took my dad, and they went common snapping turtle trapping for food, and they butchered them. I was a little kid and ate them. But I was fascinated with them. They kept them around in tanks for the summer, cleaning them out, theoretically. That's what they would say. And I got to see them and be warned about them and be scared of them. And I just thought things like that were incredible and cool. And then when I got older, it turned from the fascination of just turtles and common snapping turtles to alligator snapping turtles and thinking they were incredible. I was into reptiles. I bought this farm over 40 years ago in Cherubusco, Indiana, and I had a large reptile collection. And it came time to scale back and make life easier is what I thought I was doing. And I got rid of the large snakes and the anacondas and the giant snakes that I had accumulated and raised here on the farm in rooms of the house, that were heated and for snakes. And I was cutting back. I was making life simple, and I wanted one 4 or 5 inch alligator snapping turtle. And a guy that was buying some snakes off of me actually had one, and we bartered, and I ended up with my first alligator snapping turtle. And he also made me buy the book, which I was so lucky that I got, the Peter Pritchard um, field guide. No, what was that one called? The Biology and Conservation of the Alligator Snapping Turtle by Peter Pritchard. And on the cover is a 165 pound or something alligator snapping turtle. I go, I want one of those. And I started pursuing people that were in the book. And back then, and so many kids that I talk to nowadays can't even grasp it. But for real, there was no internet,
Right. Yep.
And when I started this, there was no internet and there was no cell phones. And so I started by chasing taxidermists and game wardens and bait shops in the South, in Louisiana and Georgia and Arkansas, and trying to find the people that Peter Pritchard wrote about in his book, and made connections. So that's what got me going in the direction of alligator snapping turtles, just the fascination with large, dangerous reptiles.
They are incredibly impressive. Our local museum in Jacksonville has one that they estimate is 55 years old, but he's 206 pounds, I think. So he could be older, I think, being that large.
I have a turtle. I have Oscar. He's 135 pounds. He was 117 pounds 40 years ago.
Wow.
So I hear these ages and I can't understand where they're getting their data. We had Crunch. He was 165 pounds and was in captivity, known for 48 years,
Wow.
not really gaining much weight, kind of leveled off at 165 pounds. So he was 165 pounds or so. Actually, it was 145 pounds when he was originally purchased from the slaughterhouse.
Wow.
48 years later, he weighed 165 pounds. So, how long one lives and how long do they take to get that big is only going to be based on how long they've been in captivity. And then there's always the variable of, did they grow faster or slower because they were in captivity?
Right.
And I would lean towards faster because they're in captivity. So to see one that's, I have seen those that are really big. I see a lot of this online at 10 years old, 30, 40 pounds. I also have some that are 40 years old here that were donated to me a couple of years ago with all their paperwork and the pictures of when the guy got them and they're only about 15 pounds. They grew up in a cold environment. They were raised in a cold environment, and they have a really thick build to them. They're not deformed in any form. They're perfectly formed, but they're strange. They're kind of thick from plastrum to carapace, the thickness of them, and they're really small for their age. I also have 30-year-olds that I've raised from hatchlings that weigh 20 pounds. So I believe that growing them fast, and I see a lot of people doing that because they want a big one. They want a big one, so they feed it and they keep it warm year round. And I think you're just accelerating its death is what you're doing. You're shortening its lifespan.
Yeah.
Rusty,
I know you mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Rusty, do you work with a certain subspecies of alligator snapping turtle?
No, actually not. And they didn't even have subspecies divisions. They one of the things that I learned, clear back, and I'll get back to, how I got my collection started and my knowledge that was handed down from these trappers out of the Peter Pritchard's book and the people that I've met through there. One of the things that Al Redmond used to tell me all the time is I can tell you where these turtles came from if I look at them. And what he was saying was eventually defined as subspecies. There was only one alligator snapping turtle in Macrocles teamniki, and if I don't say that right, I'm not really into scientific names. Most of everything I do has come from the guys that trapped them. Most of all the information I've gathered over the years is from the people I've met. So sometimes names, I get in the North, they tell me I have an accent. I get in the South, they tell me I have an accent. So I don't know where I fit. so there was only one species, and yes, I only have one species, one subspecies. That's and these would be considered the Western, everything that I have here. The ones that I have in my research study um, are all from Bayou Bartholomew. Bayou Bartholomew. That's hard to say. Say it twice fast. I want you to do it. Bayou
Bartholomew.
Bartholomew. Yeah. And they all came from there, which was kind of cool because I know that's where they came from. They were all trapped there, and they were all part of a captive breeding stock at the South Arkansas Turtle Farm. And those are the ones that we put into our research study. There's also a couple of variables put in there, and one is like unknown origins. It was from the ones that Garden State hatched, I think 3 years ago, and he gifted one over to us, and it's in our research study and doing good. And so there are 11 hatchlings that everything about them has been documented since they emerged. Every tenth of a gram that's went into them, and then key characteristics of growth are charted and logged, and I haven't really graphed them yet, and I'm really only taking measurements once annually at this point, and I want to step that up to quarterly, but the growth rates are so slow in the beginning that once a year is enough really to go through all 11 and measure the key characteristics and log them in the study. So we have that. And that is one of the outcomes of that study. I would hope to be, we try to grow them in a climate that's equal to the medium of their range. So I brumate them. I brumate them as much as 5 months out of the year. And we're picking the medium of their range, which would be like northern Arkansas, and the climates and the temperatures that are happening there. And I watch these temperatures, and I don't, abruptly run out and start warming up the building just because they had a warm spell down there. But we try to follow the same natural cycles of the seasons in the medium of their range, and water temperatures as well. So we control the study turtles. They're indoors. We have 5 outbuildings, and one building is dedicated to housing the turtles. And then we have outside habitats. I'm in northern Indiana, so the outside habitats have to have greenhouses put over them every fall. And the turtles that are in there will have a pretty short season. They get about 4 months of feeding, and I'm okay with that. To get them cranked up and eating for 4 months is really kind of a natural cycle. Some will eat 5, maybe even 6 months out of the year, but even now they're not eating in southern Louisiana, and so people, when they're keeping them warm year round, I saw somebody comment about that once, is people are treating alligator snapping turtles like they're a tropical species, and they're not a tropical turtle. So I enjoy the downtime. It used to be a time of year when I would take a break and go out and upgrade things in the buildings, and do projects that I could catch up during brumation. But now I've found myself acquiring more tropical turtles, so there's always something getting fed now, and there'll
Keeps
be
you busy year
keeps
round.
you busy
So
year.
Damon asked, how many adults and subadults do you have?
Okay, let me count. I have 2 that are over 130 pounds. Well, there's one that weighs 122 pounds, one that's 135 pounds, and then I have 6 that are getting close to breeding size. And I'm really not that interested in breeding, by the way. But they're in the, if you want to call them sub-adults, I don't know where we break the line, but I call them juveniles, and they're 25 and 30 years old. And some of them I've raised that. There's 6 of those in an outdoor pond. We've put in another outdoor pond that I can't wait to complete. This is a really cool project. And I've had the good fortune of having corporate sponsors, help from corporations, and I also had the good fortune of having a company 15 miles down the road that rotary molds for the largest tanks in the United States. So these are plastic indestructible tanks, and there's even open top tanks, and they're called containment dikes, and they've helped me out for 35 years now. And they provided a 4,000 gallon tank that's it's 19 feet long, 9 feet wide, and 4 feet deep, that you could basically fill up with water anywhere that you drag it off the trailer and put it. It's an indestructible plastic, and we buried that in the ground. And we'll go to some pictures of that here in a minute, but that's our new outdoor exhibit or outdoor habitat. And it'll get an iron fence put around it. I've got to finish the fence. And then this spring, we want to move the 122-pound alligator snapping turtle from the South Arkansas Turtle Farm into that tank. So it's a pond. It's got sand in the bottom and a biological filtration system. There's fish in it. I was able to get all that done. I think we started excavating in August this year and finally got that in. So then there was a steel company that donates the steel, because I built a steel structure around the tank to reinforce it before I put it in the ground, so that if I pump it dry, the sides don't change and the dirt doesn't slough in. If it won't cave in, although they're very strong on their own, but just so that you eliminate all the risk. There's a whole process in burying one of these tanks in the ground.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So he's in what I called a quarantine area in our building. One side of the building I keep to quarantine turtles, to keep separate from the other habitats. And he was in there. I would call it quarantine for a year, but now I would call it just, I got to get him out of there. He's been in there 2 years, and he's got to get outside this spring. So we'll probably have a little event here and have some friends, and we'll move the turtle. And once he's in there, then every fall I'll put a greenhouse up. Now we get into the 0, and below 0 temperatures Fahrenheit. So this year, I think the coldest I saw was, I think it hit below 0. It never had ice on inside the ponds in the greenhouse with no supplemental heat. So it's kind of neat what the sun can do for it. If you get, the leaves fall off the tree that shade the greenhouse and in the fall. And then when the sun hits that, it maintains it really well, because it's in the ground, and you make sure it's an airtight greenhouse that you snap together. It goes over it. And those turtles are in there. I went around and GoPro'd them. They're actually more active at 38 degrees than you think they would be.
Wow.
It's kind of surprising, yeah.
So I'm doing my math. It says, if I'm right, you have 19. Am I figuring that out right? 11 hatchlings inside? There's
a total of 27 turtles here.
27. Okay.
Yeah, there's hatchlings, and there's 11 hatchlings. There's 11. I'm still calling them hatchlings, but they're 4-year-olds now, 3 and 4-year-olds that are in the research program. So there's 11 in the research program, 2 giants, and I think 7 subadults, and it's wrote on a marker board on the wall, in case I get asked that, and then it changes, right? Somebody posted in CTPG the Razorbacks that had extras that had hatched. I got to have 3 of those. Those are neat. I'm really getting a fascination with the musk turtles. I got a giant Mexican musk turtle a year ago, and he's growing like a weed and just ravenous eater, and that's pretty fun. And I got into the matamatas about 5 years ago, and I've got some 12 and 13 inch matamatas. So the number's 27 today.
As far as when is it okay to move your turtles outside?
I don't move them outside until they're about 12 to 13 inches or so, 12-inch carapace. The reason is that's the size that are in that pond. And I don't want to put, that's a 2,000-gallon tank buried in the ground with sand in the bottom, biological filtration system, a waterfall. We'll cut to a picture of it here in a second. And I try to match them for their sizes. If you put a 5-inch in there, he would get bitten and hurt. In fact, if you don't provide adequate hides for each one of them to establish their own territory, the same thing can happen, even with the 12 and 13 inch. That can take us into Move to Preserve and what motivated us to organize Move to Preserve. But to stop these turtles, to ward off injuring one another, one thing that I've seen I can do that's not always 100% effective is to provide them each with their own hiding cave. Now, one of the downfalls to all these outdoor exhibits, I'll call them exhibits, we're not really open to the public, but it ends up being open to the public. People call, they want to come this weekend, bring their family out. Sure. I love to talk about turtles, right? And love to show you what I just did. And and it's set up. I can have a glorious weekend and never leave this place, right? I live on a resort, basically. And so I just love what we've constructed over the years. And people will come, and I like to show it to them. And the more of these outdoor exhibits I build, the less there is to show these people except the exhibit. Because what's an alligator snapping turtle? He doesn't want to be seen. And as soon as you build them a nice place and give them their caves and everything, well, they're gone. I GoPro them in the mornings. I feed them. There they are. But they don't even like to eat unless it's dusk and nobody's moving. And so it's kind of nice to keep the research turtles and a big one indoors where they can see them. I'm thinking about having some masks and snorkels, and here you go. You want to go look at this?
Good luck.
He's under there, I'm going to build him a cave and he'll be there, and I'll have some lights so we can infringe on his privacy, and maybe a camera under there all the time so you can see him down there, but you'll be able to see him anyway under the cave. The way I'm going to construct this next one is so he can stay hidden, yet you can see him. There's not going to be a visual window. I'd have to excavate a cave for us to go in, but I'm going to make it so we can see him in his cave and maybe flip a light on. I'll look for something to share here on this because
while you're doing that, Damon would like to know what the actual research program is. What is your actual research subjects being researched for?
Now, I wish I would have gave it. So I have so many photos. I have so much video. And when I was trying to put folders of pictures together for this podcast, it brings to light that I don't take enough pictures, that I shoot too much video. So much of what I do and have done is on my YouTube channel. So I would encourage everyone to go there, subscribe, right? And subscribe to my channel, check out and dig around in the shorts and the long videos. But the research program is pretty well covered in my YouTube channel, all under video. Now, what the research program is, a grouping of hatchlings that have been recorded, everything that's went into them and their growth rates, and they're all housed individually in a centralized filtration system. Right now it's 20-gallon long aquariums on racks that are stacked in racks in the turtle building, all with centralized filtration. So all the water that goes into all the aquariums, all the water that goes through the entire turtle room is now centralized filtration. And that's something I really want to talk about a lot, because I keep my mouth shut so much when I see people suggesting filtration and, this filter or that filter. In my heart, there are no filters built for filtering aquariums or the aquarium industry that are good for turtles, that are adequate for turtles, that will work long-term, low maintenance for turtles. And what we've learned in the past 5 years about constructing or purchasing biological filtration systems has changed my life, changed my world. We were typically going through annually around 50,000 gallons of softened 80-degree water every year. During feeding seasons, we would feed and we would have to change the water the turtle was fed in. And we would lower that amount and run the excess back into the storage and filtration system, feed them, but discharge the water that they ate in. And when I converted the entire property over to the upflow biological filtration system, I went through last year, I used about 1,000 gallons, really 600. And I'm still using that 600 gallons of water in an entire feeding season and winter. And all that was evaporation. So we never change their water. We don't have to change their water. It fixes itself. The only time I have changed Oscar's water is when I feed him a large mammal. If I feed about 2 to 3 times per feeding season, I'll feed him a big groundhog or a squirrels or something, and you have to change that water. So when you let them rip apart their own animal in 2,000 gallons of water, that water's shot. And you could probably even circulate that through the system and save it, but I can't wait. And that would take 2 or 3 days, and it's not worth it.
So I watched your video with the loggerhead musk turtles with the filtration on the side with the lava rock. Is that
Yeah.
is that
Oh yeah, that's where I decided, hey, let's scale this down now and show people how to do this on a real small scale using what they can find.
so
So
the
yeah,
ponds outside are like an upscaled version of that?
really is. It's a concept. It's really a concept. And so what you saw in that video is how I teach people how to take a 40-gallon aquarium, wall off one part of it,
Mhm.
and upflow. And in the videos out there, so I encourage people to watch it because this system works. And now it's been running since I released that video. I haven't done a thing except add water for evaporation and feed the turtles and the fish. It's all part. People need to think about building a system, not a system, but an ecosystem. You know, you need to try to recreate what God created out in the wild in your little captive situation or your big captive situation. So I kind of did it backwards. I went giant. You know, I built giant
Yeah.
filtration systems first, and then I thought, how far? Let's take it all the way down. Let's build a small one for these little razorbacks that are coming, and show them how to do it. You know, I mean, there's been such strides made by people though in that, you know, it's changed in a good way in the past 5 years, I'd say. What changed, what changed for me is when I met Aquascape
Mhm.
and when I met Greg Whitstock, and that's a whole story. We'll have to go back and start at the beginning of that story. But that's when I learned about biological filtration, creating ecosystems, and stop the filtration concept of how many microns or cartridges, you know, and trying to take sediment out of the water and filth out of the water. I'll call it sediment, but the pollution out of the water using filter cartridges. And
Mhm.
that's basically what you're doing when you're buying these canister filters and stuff. And also another thing I see people do that's really right now, I'm working on a project with Purdue University here in Fort Wayne to upgrade their turtle. They have a common snapping turtle at their environmental resource center, and one of the biologists out there wants to improve the turtle's life. He's in a not a very big tank, but it's not very big at all. It's too small for him, but he was little when they got him, so he needs a change. He's ready for an upgrade. There's no sand in the bottom, and I always say sand because I always use sand. It's a tightly knit in the bottom, and the pollution doesn't penetrate down into the sand like it will gravel. And they see that was one of the, I don't want to say points of resistance was we have sediment in the bottom of our tank. You need sand in there. Yeah, but there's sediment in the bottom of the tank. Right. There's sediment there because you don't have an ecosystem, because all you have is a tank with a canister filter. And the sediment lays on the bottom, and there's no bacteria to consume the sediment or to transform the sediment. So if you had sand in the bottom, you wouldn't have the sediment, or the sediment would go through the process, the process that's natural, the natural process. So the sand harbors the bacteria that consumes the organic waste that becomes the sludge in the bottom. And if you have some fish in there, they stir up the sludge as it gets finer and finer because the bacteria is consuming it. And it doesn't penetrate the sand because it's tightly knit. Look at the layers of mud in a lake or a swamp. Take it. There's so many different layers of different families of bacteria that make up that system. That system works. How can you reproduce this system indoors with your system, you know? So you got to try to recreate. You need to have more natural product, more nature in each of these habitats. So the upflow filtration gives you a method of cleaning without disturbing anything, the sediment that doesn't decompose and it falls to the bottom. You have to watch the video. There's no way I'm
Yeah.
explaining it correctly, you know. But upflow filtration, that knowledge, that teaching came from Aquascape. And I had built filtration systems over the year where your base big filtration. So let's go to my turtle room. I years ago dug a 7-foot diameter pit, 8 feet deep, in one corner of the building, and there's a tank sitting down inside that pit. It's smaller than the pit, lined the pit with another plastic tank. So there's a pit in the turtle building it's 7 feet deep and 6 feet in diameter. And there's a tank sitting down in that. All the water in the building flows to that tank and used to get sucked through aerated and sucked through pea gravel and pumped back out to the turtles. It worked, but sediment would compact the pea gravel. About annually, you would start getting what's called channeling. So the sediment would accumulate in the pea gravel, and it would start finding a route through the pea gravel and no longer filtering either. It's found a route through there. It needs to. It's getting sucked through pea gravel. The pea gravel's loaded up. It's compacted. And so I built these systems for other people this is what we did back then. You would have to try to back flush that pea gravel. The pea gravel's 6 feet deep and it won't back flush. You can't get enough turbulence to back flush that. So I would use a tube with water and jet and break it up, and a submersible pump sucking off the top to try to get rid of the sludge that you're back flushing, and you're breaking it up with a jet rod. And annually I'd have to do this. And when I converted that, and there's a video on my website about converting that filtration system over to the upflow biological system, we have not cleaned that filter in 4 years. Wow. And I haven't discharged water because it's polluted, unless I feed a groundhog to a big turtle. And that's about once or twice a year. So filtration, and creating ecosystems. I'm going to look for a video here or something. I'm going to look for something.
We had another question, whether you see them out basking in the cooler months in Indiana.
Lots of argument on that one, isn't there? I've never seen an alligator snapping turtle leave the water, and I have seen them leave the water when they're going to die. And the South Arkansas Turtle Farm, not to draw him in on a fight, they've had that turtle farm for 38 to 40 years. I can't get all my dates right in my head. And they've never seen an alligator snapping turtle leave the water unless it's laying eggs. Let me get that in there. Or dying. I've seen hatchlings leave the water that died. They're not just hatchlings. I've seen, 6-month-olds. I've seen 8-month-olds. They end up dying. I also have seen some young hatchlings that would leave the water and not die. So I think it might be more common. Now there's a guy, and I won't drop his name. He's saying with telephoto lenses, seeing long distances, big spotting scopes that are seeing well outside of the turtle knowing you're there, has seen them bask. I think that has potential. And I've seen a lot of arguing over that. I've never, and I don't get into that either. I don't get into that argument because you see what you've seen, if you've seen that, and if you're using a high powered scope and you're seeing something, half a mile off, you might be seeing something that you might be learning a trait here. They might know we're there long before we know they're there. So I guess I won't get involved in that one again. Personally, never seen an alligator snapping turtle leaving the water unless it was dying or was very young. I have seen them leave the water and not die. So that's a good question.
Chris was saying that in Houston, you don't ever see them out basking. So
I've never seen it. I've seen the arguments. Let's present here. Share a screen. See if I can do that. Oh, did I really want to do that? Cancel. Present. Share an image. That's what we want to do. I got so many files and folders. I get so dizzy.
Rusty, that big pond that you're about to put in while you're looking for your photos.
That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah.
Is that for Oscar or is that for a different animal?
He doesn't have a name yet. I'm going to let the public name him.
Nice. Mark's a good name.
He's a hunt. What? Somebody's going to win a t-shirt. I said present. Is it working? There's an issue with your file. Please try again. I wanted to show. Wonder why would there be an issue? Yes, he's going to have a name, and I had name the turtle contest. People like that. Did a YouTube video about it and had them name one that was donated to us, and they came up. They selected the name, and it was Snapped and Hook, and I'm glad I like that name because
That's great.
yeah. Let's see, is that going to present that? Oh man. Issue with your file. Please try again. What something's wrong here.
Rusty, do you have a feeding schedule for the animals?
Oh yeah, I do, and it's pretty regimental. The young ones. Let's share the screen. I got multiple screens, so I'm having trouble. Here.
We have faith in you.
I don't know, man. What do we see?
There we go. Something's happening.
All right, will that open? Well, we don't want to share that. Oh, exit. Stop sharing. I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay.
You're good. We keep getting more questions, so you keep looking.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to keep working this, and then I should be able to go through that. Let me share the screen because this is kind of cool. There you go. We should be able to
yep,
through
seeing
that.
something.
Okay, so this area here, this is what I started with, and that stone wall. Can you see my cursor as well? No arrow drawn around. Okay,
No.
that stone wall right there, my wife and I built a few years ago, and the footer we dug by hand. I dug that a long time ago, but it is the bank for a hill for a waterfall that spills into one of our turtle ponds. So going down the backside of that is a hill, and we won't be able to see that right now. So right there where that slab is, there used to be a corn crib. We live on a farm. We raise our own beef. We raise a large portion of our own food. So we bale our own hay. We raise and butcher our own cows. So a cow's born here and it dies here, and I eat it here. So then I dug that hole. That's where I wanted that tank, right there where the concrete was. A local rental company provided us with a jackhammer and an excavator, broke out the concrete slab. There's the 4,000 gallon tank and the angle iron structure that I put around it, and then backfilled it. Oh, that's out of sequence. That's our juvenile pond. That's the waterfall I was talking about. That's off the backside of that stone wall. So in here are 7 alligator snapping turtles, and they each have a hiding area in a cave. That's a 2,000 gallon tank with a biological. I used the Aquascape biofalls. On the far end, there's a stump sitting on top of it to help hide it, and it's the Aquascape. You can buy those, and they work great. They're biological filtration, and I put one of those in here. So it's sucking through a pre-filter with just large rock on this end. There's a cypress log laid across the tank to keep the sand away from the intake, and it's sealed with foam. A process. There's a video of me building the intake. So there's a submersible pump in the water that helps warm the water a little bit for me, and it's sucking out of the intake end and pumping back around out through the Aquascape biofall. Then there's a portion of the water that gets diverted to come over the old waterfall, because this used to be a koi pond, and we had koi in here. And then a greenhouse goes over that. You can see the sockets on the sides of the wood there where the bows fit in. And we used to take off that plywood wall off the deck, but now it stays on there because it keeps the turtles in. And the alligator snapping turtles are out there all summer. It's really cool. The water is crystal clear. We have plant life. We have 2-3 inches of sand in the bottom, and never change the water, and they eat every week. So the schedule, somebody asked about feeding schedule. The ones that are in my research program, I feed every 3 to 4 days when the water's over 68 degrees. So when they've reached 68, I might feed them. Thank you. I might feed them once a week at 68, but I won't linger at 68 very long, for a week or two. And then I'll get up into the 70s and 75. And then a couple weeks later, 80. And then I'll maintain around 80. Let's go to did I stop sharing? There's the pond.
Talking about your feeding schedule, that looks beautiful, man. That
yeah,
really does.
that's the new
It's
pond. It's not
gorgeous.
done, and it gets an iron fence around it. That's what I was going to be doing this week, but I'm doing something else. And the ground's still not done. It's still froze. So I'm going to be putting some steel posts in, welding them to that angle iron framework. So I got to dig holes where I already backfilled and put rock in, and put the fence posts in, put an iron fence in that'll keep the turtle in. And then in the backside along the stone wall, you can sit back there on a bench, open the gate and walk back there and sit by the stone wall on the bench and check out the turtle. I'm going to have an 8-foot gate on this side of the pond. That way you can open it clear up for people or filming or whatever you want to do. This is about build to preserve. We can save that. So let's stop sharing that. So the schedule, then during the summer months when the water is 75 and 80 degrees, I'll feed all the turtles once a week. I don't feed them more often than that, but I do feed them until they're full. So I feed them until they quit, until they wasted a little bit. So then I know they're full, right? I give them, I try to mix it up. I even mix it up. The ones that are in this research program, for instance, I feed them different species of fish and the origins of all the food. All the food is gathered by me and friends, and it's part of the fun in this whole thing. I remember once years ago, somebody said, well, I said something about these turtles have got out of hand, right, with me. And he goes, well, what else would you do with all the carp, right? 'Cause I'm going to live in the river and spear carp. Might as well have some turtles to feed. So, going to the creeks, the rivers, and exploring them really almost daily to harvest different things for them to eat is a part of my enjoyment in it. I've never fed pellets to any turtles, until recently. Now I have recently, because my Mexican musk turtle grew so fast. He's not set up decent. He's in a large aquarium up here in the office, and I'll feed him pellets every other day just so the water can clean up from the fish that I fed him the day before. Plant life, I offer them hyacinths, and they seldom eat them. So I do offer them plant life, but they seldom eat it. I've also offered acorns and found Greg Brashear and me were talking about acorns. I go, I offer them acorns every year. I hear these stories of them eating, tons of them. And Al Redmond used to tell me that. And mine would never eat acorns. And Greg Brashear, Greg Turtlehaven, said in the fall when the water gets cold. And it kind of made sense, right? Things that fall in the water in the fall, and the turtles are gut loading on things like that are not bacterial growing meat left in their intestines and in their digestive tract. So I tried it, and I think the water got down to 68 degrees, and they devoured acorns for the first time.
Wow.
So, and then I'll be mixing the ones in the study. I'll start out with wild grape seeds and stuff, and they do love fruit, blackberries, and all of them like blackberries and persimmons. So in the fall, I have to buy persimmons, and there are some wild persimmons around here. I've thought about planting some persimmon trees, and I might be dead before they start putting out fruit. So I buy persimmons and I feed the persimmons to them. So somebody asked about, fruits and basically vegetation. I offer it to them. The turtles that live in that outdoor tank that somebody said is beautiful and all that I love it out there. I love to go sit out there. It has a lot of plant life in it. All they do is climb around in it. They don't eat it. So I have plants that I brought up from Louisiana, and there's water lilies growing in there, and they do destroy them, but they don't eat them. And, there's duckweed in there, and there's, what else have I got? I got cypress trees in there that are potted. It's a really fun to sit there and be able to take a trip to the swamp and stay home. I like it. I spend a lot of time in the water. So a few years ago, we had koi in that one outdoor pond, not the new one, but the other one. And we had koi for 30 years in that pond. And when I hooked up with Greg Whitstock and Aquascape, eventually we were so blessed that we had a regional pond build event here. And Greg brought in 88 contractors, and in 3 days they built an 18,000 gallon recreational pond right outside our door. So it's at the entrance of our property, which is Blackwater Turtle Refuge. We're a nonprofit too. So, but we live here. And when you pull in the gate, there's a koi pond, an aquascape recreational pond that just blows everybody's mind when they see it. There's 2.5-foot koi in there that we've had for 30 years, you know, and we swim in it daily, and it's right up a gazebo right on it, you know, and it's just, you walk out my back door and walk 5 feet and, well, 10 feet, and you're in the water. And I think it used 60 tons of boulders and holds around 18,000 gallons of water, and has the patented aquascape bog filter, they call it, or wetlands filtration system. It's just incredible to have this crystal clear pond with boulders and koi and plant life growing in it that just takes care of itself. You know, a lot of times people would love to have, around me, there's a lot of farm ponds, and they got about a 90% failure rate. They're full of algae or weeds, and, you know, 10% of them are nice and got a gravel, but they got sterile edges, usually with crushed limestone around the top, so the waves don't stir up mud, you know, and the aquascape pond is not like that. It's like you took a trip to the mountains or something. And so the koi moved into that, and that opened up that other pond for the juveniles. Finally got to move outside, but they were growing anyway. It was going to be time, you know, they were reaching size. So the building is the turtle building is let's see, 80 by 24, and that's all for turtles. 80 by 24, insulated and heated and filtered, the building.
Hey,
Can
Rusty,
I,
before we forget, I would like, I definitely want to hit the subject of move to preserve.
yeah, that's what I was
so,
gonna.
Yeah,
Let's
so
do that.
I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, hey, we got to get here. So
Yeah, there's
tell
been,
us, this seems to be one of your passion things. So tell us about it, please.
yes. I was just reading Greg's comment. I know it. They love those persimmons and blackberries, and mulberries, but they don't like them as well as the blackberries, I've noticed. But persimmons, yeah, I remember talking to a guy that said he had a turtle in a pond, his grandma did, and it was a real small pond, been there for his whole life. And he said, I don't think that thing gets anything but persimmons. There's no fish. They all froze out one winter. And he was worried about it. And I said, well, if he's been alive out there for 30 years, you know. So Move to Preserve came about, and I'll start sharing a picture here. I've spent all these years, you know, well, it started with my own fascination for alligator snapping turtles, my own collection for alligator snapping turtles. I live in Cherubusco, Indiana. Cherubusco, Indiana is calls itself Turtletown, USA. It was called that since 1949. It has a legend that comes with this town. I moved here. I didn't want anything to do with the legend. I didn't want any news coverage or anything when I first got interested in turtles, and they tried to bring reporters out because they hear of you. You guys got a giant turtle, lives outside of Turtletown, USA. In 1949, a guy came to town and said, I saw a turtle in my pond with a head, I could get my hand up here, a head this big. And he held his hands out bigger than my head. And it hit national news, and it was 1949. The war was over. Nothing was going on. And it made the town famous for 3 years while that guy tried to prove that he saw this giant turtle in his pond. And when I first moved here 40 years ago, there was still people alive that had went and stood by the pond back in 1949 and would fight you over that story. There was a big turtle in that pond, you know. Now it's been so many years, there's almost nobody left, you know, but they still have annual Turtle Days Festival every year here in Cherubusco. It's the longest running festival in Indiana, and it's called Turtle Days Festival. And when you drive into this town, there's a turtle on their sign, and it says, welcome to Turtletown, USA. And I didn't want nothing to do with this. They tried to bring reporters out. They tried, you know, what do you think of that? I don't think anything of this, you know, I don't. And one day a guy got a grant to make a movie about it. And he asked if he could come out and film my turtle, just going to use it in his documentary. He made a documentary on the Beast of Busco, they call it. because there's about 5 things in the United States that have driven modern man out into the night with pitchforks and torches. And Sasquatch is one, and the Beast of Busco, and there's a couple others that I don't. There's one in Texas that was some kind of a panther or something. And so these things that have driven people out to search for. Well, this he was doing a documentary about it. He brought John Gutowski is his name. He was the dean of Xavier College, and he was writing a book. And so the story, they come out and they wanted a picture of my turtle. They took the picture. There was a reporter with them. I held the turtle up. They took the picture. It went out AP network and it just blew up. It was 40 years ago. Now you can find an alligator snapping turtle in one search. 40 years ago, you couldn't. Where would you see that picture? It would be rare.
Yeah.
And so it took off. And I thought, this is something I never wanted to be part of, but looks like we ought to try to make a buck on this. And I took my 135-pound turtle uptown and charged them $1 a head and ran, I don't know how many thousand people through in 4 or 5 days. And the first show was born. And then we started, eventually we kind of laid low, and maybe 9-10 years later, we set up to do it more professionally. And we had a 700-gallon mobile aquarium and heated, air conditioned, enclosed trailer. And we covered 34 states in 10 years during a 5-week tour, and saw millions of people and showed them alligator snapping turtle and taught people about alligator snapping turtle. My goal was always to teach people about alligator snapping turtles, because at that point, we used to tell the promoters that were hiring us, show them something they've never seen before. You can hire a tiger, lion, whatever, they can get their picture with it and that, but they've never seen this. Well, after a few million people in 10 years in 34 states, it was getting harder to say that. So they've never seen this. Weren't you here last year? And so we did the shows, and then we stopped doing them. And about 9 years of sitting idle on them and upgrading the systems here, I sold the aquarium to Greg Whitstock up at Aquascape, and he now houses Woody in that aquarium. And that's how we met. So teaching people about alligator snapping turtles was my focus, and developing my place. And it started to be, I wanted to do more. And somebody stepped forward and asked me the South Arkansas Turtle Farm had been in raising alligator snapping turtles for almost 40 years. I think 35 years. My years get confused, by an old man. He ended up old. At 85, he passed away with 3,000 eggs in incubation, and handing the farm, hundreds of hungry turtles, fenced in ponds, over to his daughter. And the daughter was married, and her name's Hobbs now, and Carl Guess was his name. He was a visionary on raising these turtles, and had been raising or hatching 2,000 to 3,000 of these things every year for 40 years almost. So Anthony Hobb wanted advice, was bouncing off of different people for different advice on how he just had this dumped in his lap, and the old man, he took care of it, didn't need any help, didn't share anything, got it. I got this. Then he dies. And there's a man looking at a ponds full of hungry turtles. And first thing he did was upgrade the incubation building to state of the art. Anthony Hobbs is a retired maintenance man, and you got to be built for this stuff, right? I got to be a plumber, a welder. I'm a machinist, and I can design. I'm a programmer. And it takes all that to be a successful turtle man in my book. To go in and create systems and ideas, you have to be a promoter. You have to be a salesman. To make this thing work, you have to wear a lot of hats. Anthony wears those hats. It's pretty neat. And he reached out to me, and I went down to South Arkansas, and we looked at the ponds, and we evaluated what's going on. Every year, 2 or 3 large males are coming up with lacerations, infections, and dying. So there's not too many of these 100-pounders left in the world. If you put them all in one truck and added them up, I don't know how many there would be, in the wild and everywhere. But every year he's losing 2 or 3 or more large 100-pound alligator snapping turtles to wounds. What's happening? Well, he doesn't know how many turtles are in these ponds anymore. And we decide the only thing you could do is pump these ponds dry and wrestle the turtles up, put in some more ponds, break up the colony. And those 100-pound alligator snapping turtle males are no longer needed for breeding. I mean, a 60-pound male is a perfect breeder. A 100-pound male is too big. So is it the other males that are killing these? What's killing them? So I spent 2 years putting together a team of people, or asking and working the magic and finding the right people that would meet in South Arkansas in March and get up to our crotches in mud and carry 100-pound turtles out. And there's hundreds of them. So we put together Move to Preserve, and it was 2 years in the planning, and Anthony Hobb took care of us, and his wife cooked these incredible meals. And for 3 days, we all bunked in a hunt camp together. There were 16 bunks, I think, in there. There was 27 people that gathered from around the United States. And I'm going to do a screen share here. And we all went down to the South Arkansas Turtle Farm, pumped the ponds dry, and removed the large males and put them in filtered tanks in a building, and separated the breeding population into 2 new ponds to lower the population of them in the one pond. So there were 2 existing ponds. We split that up into more ponds, and we took viable males and females and put them into the breeding ponds to try to break up and later we evaluate, what's happening here, I think, is the females are biting the feet of the large males, because the large males are trying to mount them and can't mount them, and he's just hanging on for dear life and trying to breed, and this females are ripping them up. So the large males, there's still 5 large males waiting to find homes. We relocated 2, 3, 4 400-pound plus males, but there's 5 more 100-pound plus males that need to find a place to go. And I don't know how this is going to end up if we don't find them homes. So let me share the screen again. It should. Uh-oh. Now that was Build to Preserve. I'm going to have to go back. Somebody talk while I do this.
So how many large snapping turtles did you end up placing over 100 pounds? You said there's 5 left?
There's 5 left, and there was 1, 2, 3, 4.
4 so far, okay.
4.
And what is the breeding colony size now?
The exact number I don't have in my head. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to cancel that and do another. There's around 200.
Wow.
Males, females,
Yeah.
The number, we did an inventory, but we never got all of them out of the main big pond either. We ran out of time. You got to get these turtles back in water too. This is, there's fighting going on while we're doing this. If you've seen any of the videos, the videos of us and what we were doing, 3 days of this was all a human could take.
So the breeding stock from that group, they produce babies and hatchlings. Those hatchlings are raised up for several years.
The trade, yeah. Right now it's the trade.
Release them?
No, not there.
These are for food.
Yeah, they're getting raised not for food. They're going to overseas markets and maybe for food. Who knows? Or the pet trade. There's a lot of different things have been said, and that's going to die. And what I was hoping we could do was make this breeding farm sustainable for that family and for those turtles, because they can't get released into the wild. They won't allow it. We were hoping, we worked on that. We tried to get Arkansas to allow those turtles to go back to where they were caught, because we know where they were caught, and it won't happen. They're not going to let that happen. So these things are in captivity, been in captivity, and will remain in captivity. Now, what I'm hoping is there's a lot of studies being done and a lot of great research trapping. Those guys are out there trapping and doing incredible research in the past 3 or 4 years. You've seen a lot of that online. Greg Brashear's one of them. I don't know all of them. There's a giant list of people that have been doing these trapping studies. And for what purpose? Hopefully for repopulation, maybe. If they find that repopulation would be nice, where are they going to get their turtles? Could we get something going with the South Arkansas Turtle Farm, knowing the genetics of where they came from? And if you started testing them, you would be able to identify exactly where all these could go, where they belong, again, that genetic strain. And could we see the South Arkansas Turtle Farm turn into a supplier for turtles to be released into the wild rather than sold in overseas markets? And that would be my goal. That would be what I was hoping could happen. Yeah.
That's actually a good segue into the build to preserve. Do
Yes.
we want to talk about that a little bit? I wanted to touch on that.
Let's hit move to preserve real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, video file maybe. Oh man. This might come out loud.
Oh, we got him, brother.
Nice.
Money, dude.
Absolutely.
That's Ed Kimura. Jack Thompson.
I'm down here at the South Arkansas Turtle Farm where the move to preserve has started. Down here with Anthony, I'm getting ready to help him on the pumping project. So we're going to do some test pumps, see how long it's going to take to lower the water level in this pond that's been here full of water for 45 years approximately.
I went down a week early to help get ready for this. There we go. It got worse.
The most important thing that I want to be known is just that my dad did start the turtle business. And the reason it's so important to me is because my whole life, my dad always provided for us. And there was always some type of animal who helped provide.
He was talking to a commercial fisherman
Who was raising turtles, and he thought, well, I think I'd like to do that. Because
stayed behind when the water receded. We thought they had all left, and then yesterday we saw one up in here.
See some familiar faces out there. Over half my life spent experiencing alligator snapping turtle adventures. I'm Rusty Reed, the Turtle Man. Okay, so move to preserve. We went in and we did that, and he's been having more success. No deaths, you know. We still would sure like to see homes for those large males. So that's something that. And now we should move on to, like you said, the segue to. Yeah, here we go. We're gonna talk about build to preserve. So when there was 26 of us, maybe 27 of us officially gathered from all over the United States. And you'll see, if you watch some of those videos, you'll see all kinds of people that you're familiar with that were down there at Move to Preserve. One of the guys that came though was, and he's going to make fun of me because he says I never get his name right, Ben Nakan. And that's perfect. That's exactly how you should pronounce it. Ben Nakan. And he owns the Louisiana Alligator Snapping Turtle Foundation. He raises alligator snapping turtles under the guidance of Fish and Wildlife of Louisiana for release. And he became more successful than he thought he would be, faster than he thought he would be. He has a really nice fence around alligator snapping turtle ponds. All the alligator snapping turtles have been lawfully caught under the guidance of Fish and Wildlife and put in captivity. He digs the eggs every year, incubates the eggs, and ends up exploding in production and going from about 800 anyway. 800 eggs a year are hatching. He needs to raise these turtles 2 to 3 years. So if he has 800 hatchlings, he's got to house them, 800 of them. Next year, he's still housing those. He needs to house 800 more. He's housing 1,600 hatchlings, and maybe even a third year, another 800. I can't do that math, right? And so he's feeding all these turtles for 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and rolling out 2 to 3 year olds into the wild where they tell him to go. They send in a biologist. They test all the turtles. They make sure everything's cool. They tell him where to put them, and he gets in his boat. I got to be part of the release one year. It was great, man. We went out and we released about 300 that day. We rode for an hour at 50 mile an hour out into the bayou and found where he was told to put them. And then the motor wouldn't start. It was awesome. I thought we were going to spend the night out there. We released those turtles, 300 or so. small turtles, and I filmed them taking off to start that journey of life. And man, for a guy like me that spent so many years in this, that was an emotional time. And then we went down the following year. I put together the team again. As many that could do it, and it was the worst time of year. This time it was in August. It wasn't in March. March, it's cold. Nobody's going on vacation for a lot of people. So March was easier, but this was going to be in August, so that when they hatch, we got to have somewhere to put these 800 new hatchlings. So Ben had some corporate sponsors, and he rounded up some tanks, and a group of us went down there and built, we called it Build to Preserve. Another group of us again went down, and Aquascape provided him with the biofalls, and we plumbed up and got a system running to do a closed loop system where it's running through the biofalls, and there's two large 16-foot tanks full of turtles, 2 tanks with the biofalls filtering the water. And then there's an open loop system also to introduce canal water, swamp water. There's a canal that runs behind their preserve, and we can bring in fresh canal water and circulate that through so that they're in the actual water that they'll be turned loose in. So when we went away, he was set up with this cool building. Let's do another present. Share screen.
That must have taken a lot of red tape to convince the state to allow them to release animals. That
he worked with he took care of all
in
that.
Captivity. That's
That doesn't
amazing
happen
that
very
they would allow it
often.
to happen.
I agree. And that's where I wish we could help the South Arkansas Turtle Farm pull off the same stunt here. So that stopped sharing.
And there's no way Louisiana's talking to Arkansas to move that needle.
I don't know. And that's not dead in the water by any means. It's a guy can only do so much, it's, I think we talked a little bit about that when we were doing equipment check. You said, is there anything you're uncomfortable talking about? There was a couple things. One of them's politics, right? And we're not going to go there. We got time to cover turtles. But it's the political system that you have to get involved with to make things like that work. Unfortunately, and I've had to do that. I've had to do that. I've had to speak to the Senate to be able to show people my alligator snapping turtles. I had to put on a suit and a tie and address the Senate of Indiana to be able to exhibit my turtles. And I did it. And, I had to work the system. You had to work within the system to convince those people. So, maybe we'll be pursuing that with Arkansas next. Right now, this year, Build to Preserve is going to be happening right here for me. I got to finish 3 things, and I'll be working on that all year. So here was Build to Preserve. This is the little thing I built for all of us that were gathering, and that's when we went down and did it. Oh, it won't do the next slide. Oh, that ain't gonna work. Oh, hey,
there we go.
One. I think it's going to do it on its own. Okay, there's the tanks in the building. There's a bunch of turtles we put up on a log. We put roughly 800. Oh, we don't want to do that. That's pretty cool too, though.
A walk.
Okay, so yeah, I'm done sharing, I guess. Yeah, we want to do it again. Here, let's look at this since it's
so
there.
How long has Build to Preserve that program of release been active?
I believe Ben's in his 5th year, but it grew and grew quick. So he went from, he said at first it was just 30 eggs, and then maybe 100, and 30 turtles, and then we'll look at that in a second. But that's the group from Move to Preserve. That photo finally came up. But look, you'll see faces in here, and these people are from all over. This is the guys that wallowed in the mud. See Michael Skibstead there, and Greg Whitstock, and Ed Kimura, Brandon James. There's Ed Ballou.
I just see dirty showers everywhere.
Actually, that's you know what we need to do. We need to show that. This is one funny
video. Shower must have looked like a
No, we cleaned up first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hose outside.
Yeah, it was in the pond. And we had just turned, I remember I did a podcast with the boys Let's see. Oh yeah, here's what we need to do. Let me see if I can pause this. All right, let's present. And then
all right, I'm going to ask a couple more questions while you're doing that. The build to preserve, the hatchlings that you release, are they microchipped or tagged in any way that they're seeing the results?
Yes, some of them are not radio tagged.
Okay.
Not transmitter tagged. Here we go. So he wants to do that. I've been part of a project here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, outside of my town. 15 miles south of here is the second largest city in Indiana, is Fort Wayne. It's where everybody goes to buy stuff. And, my town's got 2,000 people. And so down there, one of the biology students I've hooked up with at Purdue has comet snappers tagged with transmitters, and I got to be part of that all summer. I could go tracking with him, and he's doing his master's on this and learning some neat stuff. The more he learns that he could learn more. That's one thing he says. It seems like the more you learn you don't know. So check this out. You asked about the shower. First, we cleaned up. First, we turned loose like 30 turtles in this pond. Then we went 20 feet and washed up, because they're not going to go 20 feet, are they? And this Michael Skibstead, Jack Thompson. We're washing up. And that's Michael Skibstead. You guys know him, right? So this is a long, hard day.
Baptized in turtle water. There
Yep.
you go. Greg's smart enough to stay out of the water.
So good times. It was like a brotherhood, man. Because we all slept together, ate together, wallowed in the mud together, and that's how we cleaned up. And to tell you the truth, one of those two guys there in the pond on the first night didn't clean up. And I said, what? You guys there's a shower back here. We're just going to get muddy tomorrow. They just went to bed covered in that. It was hilarious.
Well, I want to be respectful of time.
Yep.
So is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about?
Watch my videos. Focus your watching on the things you can learn about biological filtration and setting up natural systems for your animals. If we're going to keep these things in captivity, if we're going to house God's creatures in captivity, then we owe it to them to provide them the most naturalistic existence that we can recreate in a healthy manner. I see bad advice every day telling you not to do that. I see don't brumate, don't put anything in the bottom of your tanks. I see things that I think are destructive advice to the well-being of the animals that we're keeping in captivity. So you owe it to these animals to try and reproduce a naturalistic existence, the closest that you can. And even then, we'll all miss things. And we know that. And those things that we miss can shorten their life. Providing them the most naturalistic, good health is a byproduct of proper conditions. So is bad health of wrong conditions. So if you want to keep these things healthy in captivity, try to recreate what God gave them in the wild, the closest that you can. All right. That's my closing. Great. Yeah, it's very important.
So if people want to find you, you're Rusty Reed the Turtle Man on YouTube.
Rusty Reed the Turtle Man on YouTube.
On Instagram.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah.
And Facebook. TikTok. Yep. Okay. Yep. And
mostly it seems like on Facebook, mostly I'm Rusty Reed. I post everything on Rusty Reed. It's kind of gets confusing. There's Blackwater Turtle Refuge. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and I transferred it over to a nonprofit a few years ago with several different reasons. And we're a nonprofit organization here. And there's Blackwater Turtle Refuge. That's where we live. That's where we work. Then there's Rusty Reed the Turtle Man on Facebook. And there's Rusty Reed on Facebook. And Rusty Reed, I post everything on Rusty Reed, and then I share it to Rusty Reed the Turtle Man. So when I create a video or I can create a thought or something, I have to post it on Rusty Reed the Turtle Man on Facebook, a Blackwater Turtle Refuge on Facebook, Rusty Reed the Turtle Man on Instagram, Rusty Reed the Turtle Man on TikTok, Rusty Reed on X, the Turtle Man, and Rusty Reed the Turtle Man on YouTube. And I would ask you to watch these videos, dig into some of the things on sand and my thoughts on sand and filtration, and dig into some of those videos. They're out there, and you know, sometimes I don't think they get the views they deserve. And the same with shorts and longs. A lot of times, dudes, I am booked, right? I'm booked every minute. I don't sleep very much. I drink a lot of coffee, and I get up every day. It starts at 3 a.m. And I try to get as many videos out as I can that are helpful videos, but I find myself leaning on shorts, which kind of stinks because what can you do in 1 to 3 minutes?
Yeah.
You can't teach people much in 1 to 3 minutes, but watch my shorts because I've tried. So, you know, I also want to, you know, to other people that are trying to be creators and stuff, don't ever let that be the focus. A friend of mine does educational exhibits. He says when he's talking to a group of kids and they find out he's on YouTube, it all becomes about that. I would never want that to happen. I'm trying to use these mediums to reach people, change their hearts. They've all learned so much lately. So let me teach them how I do it. You know, it used to be teach them about the creature, about the animal. Now it's easy to learn that, but it's this piece on how to maintain those animals is not very well spoken out there sometimes. So I try to cover as much of that as I can.
And sometimes the info out there is not good. So
I can't believe it. And I'll tell you this, a lot of AI information coming up really wacky too.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Rusty,
Definitely
I've
a
watched your
problem.
videos on how to build filtration systems and what you're doing, and the fact that you're using filtration for these big monster turtles. I'm very impressed with what you're doing. I tell the community, if you get a chance, go check your channel out, because I agree what you're doing is the right way to do it. So
Thank you.
we took the responsibility to keep these animals in captivity. We have a responsibility for those animals then. So let's do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Big push. This group, I think, pushes that pretty well. It's good. It's a good group. TTPG. Very good group to be part of.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah,
No,
thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight. And thank you to everyone who joined us in the chat. And I guess that's it for us. I don't know if Michael, if you want to close us out.
Pop up, Mike.